Okay. Thank you, Louise. Welcome everybody. I hope you're having a great day today. Sadly, I only managed to get into one session myself, but that was the keynote and it was incredibly inspiring. So yes, I'm feeling very, very pleased I managed to get to one session. Thank you for joining us for this last session today. Apologies, I can't be on camera with you. I have a terrible signal and don't want to ruin the flow of the session by dropping in and out. So I'll remain incognito. If you could please keep your mics off. I'm sure you've heard this several times today, but during the presentations, unless you've got a burning question, if you could leave those till the end, please. We've got a dedicated Q&A before the session finishes, or pop any queries in the chat and we can pick them up there and answer them as we go along. Okay, so my name's Janica, as Louise said. I'm a project manager at Devon Communities Together. I've been here since January this year and working since January this year full-time on the Pathfinder project. So all my time's going to Pathfinder, which is fab. I'd like to introduce my colleagues from the Pathfinder team who are here with us today. So Phil, if you'd like to say hi.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be part of the session today. And I'm from JBA Consulting. I'm technical director, and I've been working on Pathfinder for about 18 months now. So I've got a few slides in a minute just to take you through what property flood resilience is all about. Thanks, Janica.
Louisa?
Oh, can you see me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Louisa Inch. I'm Managing Director of Premier Water Solutions 10. And this is Michael Child.
Hello.
Project Manager, again, of Premier Water Solutions. And we will be delivering the live demonstration in about 15 minutes.
Thanks, Louisa. And Molly?
Hi everyone, yeah, my name's Molly Flynn. I'm the Community Flood Resilience Coordinator for the Cornwall Community Flood Forum, and I've been working on the project since it started.
Fantastic, thank you all. If you could pop the next slide on, Molly, that would be great. Okay, so I won't go through this because time is of the essence with the presentation, but you'll see the slide is just showing you what we're doing today. So if you want to pop over to the next slide, Molly, that'd be great. Okay, so the Pathfinder project, just to put you in the picture as to what it is, South West Property Flood Resilience Pathfinder, in its full title, is a DEFRA funded project supported by the Environment Agency and led by Cornwall Council. And it's led on behalf of all the LLFAs, which means local lead flood authorities in the Southwest. So you'll see them there. They're Devon County Council, Plymouth City Council, Torbay Council, and Council of the Isles of Scilly. And we work in partnership with all of the people you'll see on the bottom line there. They're all critical partners in the project. And 3 of our critical partners are here with us today. So that's JBA Consulting, CCFF, DCT and DCRF, and obviously Premier Water Solutions. So yeah, there's lots of us all doing a fab job to get this project off the ground. Thank you, Molly. So our aim today, well, we're going to talk to you about PFR, which you'll hear a lot about. So that's property flood resilience. As Louisa said, we're going to show you a live demonstration of PFR, so we can help you get to grips with how it might help understand how to manage flood risks. And really today, after today, we want to help you think about how you can promote PFR in your community to strengthen your resilience. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're really trying to do. Also helping you as an individual or a business or an organisation, or indeed your whole community, to make better, more informed decisions about PFR in the face of flooding. So really that's what we're about. Thank you, Molly. Okay, we've been working very closely recently with a company called Aardman Animations. Hopefully that's a familiar name to you. If it's not, they are the creators of Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, you know, to name two, very famous Oscar-winning animators. And we've managed to produce a animation which explains flooding and property flood resilience, and we hope it's impactful. We're going to show it you in a second, just to say you can view it again from our website, which, as we said, is befloodready.uk, and the link's on the screen. If you could just pop that on, Molly, that would be great.
This is how I met my neighbors. It began with a storm. We were ready. But they did not see it coming and were completely taken by surprise. Missy, most of all. Luckily, we managed to save Missy just in time. She was in a bit of a state, but she soon recovered. When the waters subsided, we took Missy home. And I helped my new friends to be flood ready for next time. To protect yourself from flooding, visit befloodready.uk.
Thank you, Molly. I must say, if you look at it on the website, it's not as jumpy. Obviously, sharing it over over a platform like this makes it sort of less smooth. But yes, do please have a look at it. It's a great resource, and hopefully you see it's incredibly good. So as you saw in the film, if we can go to the next slide, please, Molly. The Property Flood Resilience booklet is also on the website. You can download it, as you'll see on the screen there in the right hand corner, or if you want hard copies, we can also send those out to you. I'll put an address in the chat that you can send your details to, and we can post those to you if you want some for your community or yourself. Okay, thank you. So before I hand over to Phil, if you've been around all day, you've heard a lot about climate change, or as I should say from the keynote, climate heating. So we're obviously experiencing more extreme weather events. Autumn, winter, summer months are recording wetter than average levels of rainfall. More intense coastal areas affected by rising sea levels, and we're seeing more frequent and larger storms. Apologies, my phone's ringing. We've heard about the green industrial revolution Lucy spoke about this morning, and wetter and warmer winters in Devon, and with those associated flood risks that come along. I think Crystal mentioned that 2015-2016 was the second wettest winter in 250 years. So pretty scary statistics there, all backed up by science. So all these things are adding to impact on our flood risk. And I'm going to hand over to Phil now, who's going to talk a bit more about flood mapping and then move on to PFR in more general terms. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Janica. And that's a really nice introduction to climate change. And as Janica said then, with the effects of climate change, we are seeing stormier, wetter winters, and that's making more parts of our land at risk of flooding that typically haven't experienced flooding in the past. And there's lots of different sources of flood risk, as we know. We've got river flooding that we refer to as fluvial. We've got tidal and coastal flooding. We've got surface water flooding, reservoir flooding, groundwater flooding, and flooding from sewers as well. Now, typically, the extent of flooding that we might expect to see from rivers and coasts is constantly being mapped by the Environment Agency, not just for present day conditions, but also when we start to consider the effects of climate change. But a resource that's never really been available until the last year or two is the extent of our land which is at risk of surface water flooding now, but also in the future as well. And through the Pathfinder project at JBA, one of the things that we've done is that we've done some surface water modelling. And on this slide and the next slide, we've just got an extract from that modelling. And forgive the resolution a little bit, but hopefully you can see it clear enough. This is a screenshot from Ivy Bridge, but we've got all of Devon and all of Cornwall mapped. And what you can see here is the blue shaded areas are those areas that are at risk of surface water flooding today. But when we add in the effects of climate change, so warmer temperatures, rising sea levels, more frequent and larger storms, we start to see the areas of green and red pockets become at risk as well. So, for example, if you look at the sort of bottom of the graphic there, you can see Yolan's Farm. Just north of that, north of the A30, you can see some patches of red and patches of green. These are additional areas of Ivy Bridge, additional areas of the town that will become at risk of surface water flooding as we progress through the next sort of 50 years or so. And Molly, if you're able to just move us on to the next slide. Thank you. Here's another example, this time from Lympston, which is just east of the estuary. And again, quite marked areas of the village there, which will become at risk. So when we're thinking about what we can do to better protect our communities from flooding, not only do we need to consider the source of flooding, but we also need to consider the effects of climate change. So we need to consider the areas that are at risk today, but also the areas that will become at risk as we move into the future. Now, of course, it would be fantastic if all of our communities could be protected from flooding. And Molly, if you're able to move on to the next slide, this is a really nice graphic which explains how we are able to protect different communities. Now, typically and traditionally, it's been perhaps, I guess you might call the luckier few, those at the top of the pyramid who've benefited from the traditional hard engineered flood defence schemes. But there are sort of two reasons why all of our communities may not benefit from those. Firstly, it's a very simple financial reason. It stands to reason that you wouldn't invest millions of pounds where you've perhaps only got 5 or 10 properties at risk. And that's because funding is allocated on a cost and benefit ratio. So there are obviously financial reasons at play. The other reason is technical. In some communities, there are very good technical reasons why certain flood protection schemes aren't possible. I'm working in a community at the moment in Cornwall, where it's a very narrow valley, very tight topography, and the best answer would be to upsize the existing culvert that runs under the only road into the village. But technically, that's just not going to be possible, so we need to look at other options. In the last few years, temporary barrier schemes have been introduced in some parts of the UK on sort of major rivers. I know the Environment Agency used them on the Severn at Ironbridge and Upton and Worcester, places like that. But beneath those, typically, communities would have been left with an ineffective sandbag or nothing, actually. And this is where, in the last decade, property flood resilience has helped to plug that gap, bridge that gap. And it now means that we can better protect a larger number of properties, not just now, but also into the future, with very effective means. So we've just got some slides now to sort of explain what property flood resilience is all about before we go into Louisa's demonstration. Next slide, please, Molly. Thank you. So property flood resilience, PFR, as you'll often hear it be called, is, as it says on there, a term used to describe measures that help to reduce flood risk to people and properties. And these measures enable households and businesses to reduce the damage caused and make recovery and reoccupation easier. Now, you'll notice the language that's used there. It says to reduce the damage. It doesn't say to prevent damage. So this is like any flood protection scheme. It's not prevention, and it would be wrong to say that we could protect every property, or that we could make a property entirely sort of flood proof. But actually, it's about reducing, because if you can reduce the amount of water that goes into your property, you're much likely to reduce the damage that's caused. You're therefore much more likely to not have to move out, make large insurance claims, and not have all the stress and the anxiety that goes with that. You may have heard PFR be called something different over the last decade. It's changed its name a few times. It was called property level protection. So the emphasis was on protecting properties, but with the industry has sort of evolved that into resilience. And that's because it's a bit more than just the measures. It's a bit more than just the products. It's about mindset. It's about attitude and behavior, being able to understand your risk and having a flood plan in place at your property and within your community so that you can be prepared. Molly, if you're able to just flick onto the next slide. We mentioned then that there are these measures that you can introduce at your property. And these are split into two. We've got resistance measures and resilient adaptation. I'll explain both of these. Resistance measures are those that, as it says on the slide, they form a barrier between the encroaching floodwater and the building. And the aim of these is just to reduce the amount of water that comes inside. And as I said, by consequence of that, you therefore reduce the damage. So there's a whole range of these, and Louisa's got some fantastic demonstrations in a minute. The other type of measure that you can take at your property is resilience, resilient adaptation, and that's where you adapt the internal parts of your property so that actually, if water does come in, you can clean up a bit more quickly, and that recovery and reoccupation process is a bit quicker. So maybe you don't have to move out. Maybe you can mop up, clean up a bit quicker. So on the next slide, which I think is my last one for now, we have a graphic of a property. And if you go to the befloodready.uk website, you can find this interactive graphic, and you can hover over different parts of a property, and it will give you some examples and some animations of different products that you can use. So Louisa will take us through all of these in a minute. But in terms of resistance, those products that try and keep the water out, we now have on the market some very effective products. And these include things like barriers for doorways and flood doors, floodgates that can go in sort of boundary walls, garden walls, air bricks that close by themselves. They got valves in them so water doesn't go into the cavity beneath the floor, protection for air vents, valves, one-way valves on waste pipes and sewers, pumps, portable pumps, and sump pumps, as well as work that you can do to the brickwork to make that more resistant. So things like improving the pointing or filling any gaps. And then in terms of the resilient adaptation, the things you can do inside, well, there's a lot of work that you could do to walls and floors. There's certain resilient furniture that you can introduce, raise your electrics and your boilers so that they're above the flood level. So what we've got now, I can hand over to Louisa, who will give us a demonstration of these type of products before we come back and we discuss how these sorts of products are funded and how you can sort of explore them with local options. So Louisa, I think over to you at that point.
Can I just say this is the time at which it would be a good idea to viewing on your screen from gallery view to speaker view?
Okay, can everyone see me? Yeah. Okay, hi, I'm Louisa. Thanks very much, Phil, for that presentation beforehand and for giving a good overview of the difference between resilience and resistance products that are available on the market. One of the things that we're actually looking at is to assess the risk of flooding that's going to happen to your property or your business. By now, you've probably either experienced flooding or you've looked at the flood maps and seen that you might be at risk of flooding. One of the things that is of paramount importance is making sure you've got suitable insurance in place. So there's two types of insurance, and it's worthwhile just quickly going over these at the moment. The first one is Flood Re. Now, Flood Re only covers domestic dwellings of your primary residence, and it provides low-cost insurance in high flood risk areas, and it only covers properties which were built before 2007. So at the moment, if your property is at risk of flooding and you've got high insurance excesses or premiums, then you can go to other insurers and ask whether or not that they offer insurance under the Flood Re protection plan. But all the other insurers, all the other products such as commercial or buy-to-let properties, things like that, they are not covered under Flood Re. And under that, there's another scheme which is called Flood Flash. And Flood Flash works on a different principle. It's based on this, you have a large pole which goes outside of your property, and the water comes in through the holes at the bottom. And then as the water level comes up the pole, and it determines when you've got your insurance payout. So for example, if you pay to have your property or your business protected with PFR products, which are typically either up to 600 millimeters or 900 millimeters in depth, you would then have the insurance that would pay out over 600 millimeters or over 900 millimeters. What happens is in the top of this pole, there's a microchip, and this information is fed back to the office of Flood Flash. And then you actually get the insurance money payout even at the trigger point at which you set. And the good thing about this policy is that you actually get rewarded for actually installing the PFR products. And it's worthwhile knowing about these insurance products to make sure that your property or your business is protected in the future. The other point to make about Flood Re is that it is transitioning out of the marketplace in 2039. So Phil's very quickly said about having a personal flood plan or maybe a business flood plan, and or a community flood plan. And these are important because obviously you need to know at what point you're going to evacuate or you're going to put your barriers up in your property or in your business. One of the things that we do talk a lot, and especially with the Environment Agency, and that is having your own grab bag, which is what you have, which we've got here. And it's just an inflammable bag. And some of this would be it would have all these items in there, and some of them are a copy of your emergency action plan, copies of your insurance or passports or licenses, spare house or car keys, torch or batteries, a whistle, medication or repeat prescription, first aid kit, antibacterial hand gel, wash kit, glasses, contact lenses, change of clothes, phone and phone chargers, babies, food and nappies, pet needs and food, laptops, and children's games and toys. And of course, what the problem is, when you've got to leave the property in an emergency, you need to have everything all together and you can just leave the property. So at the point before you actually do the evacuating of the property, then we've got some other measures here, and we've got a combination of between resilience and resistance. And so I'm going to hand over to Mike now, and then we're going to go through and we're going to describe which one is resilience and which one is resistance.
Hello, welcome. I'm going to show you some products this afternoon for restricting the water coming into your property. We start with things called non-return valves, Nrvs for short, which actually prevents water coming into the property through the manholes, surface water gullies, up through your sink, your shower, into your toilet and things like that. So start off with the conventional stuff that you can get off the shelf. This is just but one. What this one does, this actually gets installed into one of your existing manholes. All the levers, like a toilet, it actually slides into the manhole. As the water comes from the surcharge line, it'll actually hit this point here. This actually protects you and causes a seal, so no water can get past this point. Once that actually is the water subsides, you can open it up and let it run through. If you're potentially going on holiday and you're worried about flooding while you're away, there's an actual locking mechanism on this one that you can lock it into place so no water can actually enter while you're away. So it just gives you that peace of mind while you're away that no water is going to actually enter your property. So that's one design there. There's another one, exactly the same scenario, just a different brand, exactly the same. If the flood water comes, it seals it off on a rubber seal, protects you. Once the water subsides, your fluid or effluent or whatever it may be will be released through the flap there. Also, there's a locking mechanism to keep it shut as well. So, like I said, if you're on holiday, it just gives you that peace of mind that you cannot get any water in while you're away.
One of the things, sorry to just jump in there, Mike, one of the things to bear in mind is you can get sewerage flooding whether or not you're connected to the mains or whether or not you're connected to your own private septic tank drainage system. So most people associate sewerage flooding with mains or from Southwest Water, but it's not. You could have groundwater flooding that comes up through your soakaway or land drainage system and back up through your septic tank and up through your drains. So it affects everybody.
So these ones, as we were talking about, these actually fit in your existing manhole. So they could, your lead manhole towards your property, this one could be fitted at that point. So it would stop any water coming back to the property from the main lines, say the sewer or the surface water line. We talked about it a minute ago about your waste coming up through your sinks, your shower, your bath. These are a non-return valve, exactly the same as the other version, but literally these fit on your 40 or 32 mil waste. As you can see, going right through, if the water comes and surcharges this way, the flap will drop down and protect your property. You can fit these vertically or horizontally. Just make sure when you're actually purchasing these that you get the right one for what you're actually going to be doing with it. Okay, as you can see, opens up that way, locks off, and you cannot literally physically go through that point there. If you're looking for a non-return valve that you want to protect your property against Southwest Waters or any other water company sewage, you go to things like this. This is called a double non-return valve. What this one does, this fits on your inline pipework, comes in various sizes depending on what pipe diameter you have. This actually fits into a chamber rather than that which is an existing chamber. So this, you create a chamber on its own and this is installed into that pipework. What this one does, this is a double non-return valve. So what this happens is your flow comes through here, as you can see, lifts the flap up, moves through to the second flap, and then you've got flow right through. If you can see that. When you get surcharging fluid coming towards it, it prevents any fluid from actually going back towards your property. If it breaks through the first one because there's not a very good seal or it's got some things stuck in it.
Wet wipes or something.
Yeah, wet wipes are the worst thing. They get stuck into the flaps and actually stop it from working correctly. You can also, like I said, with the smaller ones, peace of mind when you go away, the red handle is a locking mechanism. It locks off the secondary boundary one, so it will not penetrate through that point there. If you look at one that I've opened, this is for general maintenance. So this is one that's opened up. As you can see, you've got the two flaps, literally 1 and 2. Maintenance wise, you just literally take them out, clean them off and put them back in. Just like that.
And it's important to do that, especially after a heavy downpour, if the pipe has been surcharged, because any detritus that you have in and affects those seals, then obviously they won't seal down. So probably best to lift them out or at least clean them and hose them down with a hose pipe.
There's also another one on the market which is becoming more popular at the moment. This one actually stores into an existing manhole, exactly the same as the smaller version, but a very heavy duty. It's based out of obviously a metal casing, and it's got a neoprene inner. What happens? Water coming towards your property enters this way. It stops it at that point. So no water can penetrate the property from this point here. Once the water subsides, this is your exit going out. It lifts that and opens it up and releases all the fluid.
Can't really see, but yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So once you've got surcharge in line, it will put pressure on the rubber neoprene and close it off. So that's another one that can protect you. Moving on to other things that you can use for air bricks, for instance. Your normal standard air bricks don't prevent water coming into the property. These air bricks here, these are the ones that we provide for properly flood resilience, and these will protect you. What happens with these? Water comes in, it hits a certain level, and as you can hear, there is little balls in these 4 holes here. What happens is the water level rises, the balls float up to these points here and prevent a protection against any more water coming into the property.
Well, what it does is when those ball bearings rise up, it actually closes the vents on the side, on the front, if you see over here. And then that actually stops, that closes off the vents so the water can't get in underneath the property. And so it's what we call a passive system, which means that you don't actually have to go out and manually fit a cover on the top of the air brick. So they're really helpful again if you go away.
So if you've got an older style property, you can double these up. A layer of a silicon called CT1, which is an appropriate silicon to use with these. We'll seal them together, and then you can build them up as many as you need to, and then render around. Another option that you can do is this would actually fit to your wall. Exactly the same scenario, the CT1 sealant that will protect it against the side of the property. What that does, your air brick will sit inside like so, and then with this you've got a clip-on rubber seal that will protect it. So these 4 latches will lock into place and protect your property from any water leaking into the property. So that fits on your wall, and you can either leave it like that, or if you're concerned about flooding, leave it like that at the time. Anytime that you're going to potentially have some flooding that you're aware of, or you're going on holiday, fit it on, gives you the peace of mind. Exactly the same as the other products that I've showed you so far. It just gives you that peace of mind when you're away that this will protect your property as much as you can.
The other thing just to note is that on this back frame, that will always be against the wall of the property. These comes in different colours, so it can be grey, white, black. I think there's a terracotta. The same with these here at this of the smart bricks.
These come in various sizes. This is just an air brick one. They can cover your electrical gas meters or any pipework that actually is on the external wall of the property that actually leads into the internal walls of the property. You can just put this over the top and actually seal anything from actually impregnating into the walls or actually into the cavity, or worst case, into the actual property itself.
One of the things that we also make sure is that you've got to look at where your cable and ducting goes into the property. That's for your electric and gas. So it's all very well fitting all these barriers and flood doors and things like that on the external part of your property. But if you've got a ducting which goes through, that's obviously a major source where the water can get into the property.
Moving on a little bit, if you're looking to fit a flood barrier, this is one type of flood barrier. They also do another type of flood barrier, literally the same as the flood guards here, but obviously on a larger scale. But with the flood barrier, it'll be 3-sided rather than 4-sided, and then you'll have this clamp seal across the front. This one type of barrier, you use these screws, so you've actually cored into the actual walls. You've got a screw thread actually already existing in the walls, and then you literally put through, and what you're trying to do is create a seal all the way down the sides. Also on the base of this unit, you've also got a seal across the base. There is more screws inside of this unit, so you screwing down. With this unit, you have to make sure, if you're going to install this unit, you have to install it correctly. If you fit one side too tight and then the other side won't close in properly, you're not doing it successfully. You need to make sure that you do all these individually and just tweak them all together all the way around and until you're confident there's a seal. There is another system that we use. This is a different type of barrier. So this one here, this one here is just a different type. So this one here, it actually fits in the doorway of your property. You can have it zero threshold. So if you've got disabilities or wheelchair access is needed, you can access through the zero unit. So this will be sunk into the floor, and then you put the tread plate over the top. What this one does, this one comes in panels, sectional panels. What you do, you slide them through, lock them into place. This could be of any different size, height, length, to cover what you need. What you do is you have a rubber seal on the back of this unit. So this rubber seal will actually screw in on all 4 points, exactly the same as the other unit. Screw in opposites first and actually get that to seal against the backing seal. And then the last top one, say if you're at 600 mil or 900 mil, the last panel that you put in, you put these through on the last one and actually screw these down, and it creates another seal pushing down onto the base of the unit with these rubbers here. So these rubbers will create the seal on the base. Exactly the same scenario, but a different type. That's all it is.
There are two products that we don't actually have with us, and that is a flood door and a floodgate. And these are two other important types of methodology of actually stopping the water from getting to your property. So with the flood door, it's very similar to a UPVC door, but you've got more gaskets and you've got a bigger seal which goes around the side of the door. And that's another good way of stopping the water, especially if you've got a property where you're not in all the time, or if it's a holiday let where you can't rely on somebody to actually go and who is untrained to be able to go and do the barriers. So you would have a flood door in that circumstance. The other one is a floodgate. So just say if you've got an external boundary wall and you're trying to physically stop the water from getting to the property, you can put a floodgate on, which will actually, so you're using the gate and the wall to stop the water from getting to the property. But the one thing you've got to bear in mind is that if you've got downpipes or anything like that which discharge onto the ground, that water can actually get out through the garden area. Otherwise, you're going to create a pond behind your floodgate.
So we've looked at the prevention of getting the water in. If we know that there's actually going to be water coming into the property, we can't stop it. We look at measures that bring you back into the property quicker. What we've got two types of pump. This pump here is classed as a puddle pump. This puddle pump is installed normal 240 plug-in on the electric. Extend the hose as long as you need. What you could do is send it out of the back window, or if the level's lower than the front window, you can pump it straight out the front window. This level here, as you can see by the little louvers on the bottom, it will pump down to that actual level. So it leaves you minimal waste or effluent or whatever the material may be in the property. So that's one point that you could use. If you're knowing that the fluid is going to come in, what you can have is this one. This is called a sump pump. This sump pump, usually at the threshold of the front door or the threshold of the back door, where you've got your rubber mat, your welcome mat, or whatever you want to have in front, you sink this into a chamber. So this chamber would accommodate this pump. So it's a concrete base, concrete sides. All the levels would actually run to this point here where the pump would sit. The hose, exactly the same, but on a larger scale, but you could have it pumped out onto a high level, about a metre above the ground, like a normal conventional waste pipe. You could pipe it to that and it'd kick the water back out from the threshold of the door. This one here, exactly the same scenario, fitted in, excuse the breakage here. It sucks from a very, very low level, exactly the same as the other one. So you are constantly sucking out as much water as you possibly can, leaving the residual in there, which could potentially be mopped up. This one here has got an auto or manual setting for the float switch. So this one here, wherever you set the level, it'll actually kick in itself. So this is in theory, you don't have to maintain this one as much or set it up as much as you would the little puddle pump that I've just showed you. This is already in position. All you'd have to make sure is a general maintenance of this unit, potentially every 6 months. Fire it up, put a bit of water in there, make sure it works, and then hopefully it'll be long lasting and save your property from any flooding.
One of the things that I think Phil alluded to earlier is that with PFR products, what we're doing is actually slowing the rate that the water comes into the property. So it depends how deep the water is outside the property and how long it's outside. So PFR is about having measures in place. So it's not just one thing like a flood door or a flood barrier. It's a flood barrier and it's a puddle pump or a pump sump. And then we've got some like a high suction water backs so that you're actually stopping the water and controlling the water as it flows through the house.
Looking at other things, so let's just say you did flood. You want to get back into that property as soon as possible. Carpets and laminates and things like that don't work if you know that you're going to be flooded continuously. So everyone would think that all the tiles on the market for doing this kind of thing would be horrible and not interested in it because they haven't got the type that you like. But looking at them now, there's totally different variations on the market. Here's two in the hexagons. We have got, if you've got an old Victorian property, we've got various types, or if you've got the old stone floor, these are various types that we can use. The good thing about this, the company that actually supply these tiles actually do a grout in any colour on the scale here. So the scale chart actually gives you an idea when you buy your tiles and purchase them from this company that you can actually choose a grout of your liking to actually go with them tiles.
The other thing just to point out is that obviously if you've got a suspended timber floor in your property, then when it comes to flooding, that is not ideal. So what we're trying to move towards is a solid concrete floor. And then of course, then you can put your waterproof insulated board underneath, your insulation board, and then you can lay your tiles on top with your waterproof grout. And then once the water comes in, it's very easy to sweep that water out and desanitize and get back into that property as quickly as possible.
Even on the market now, you can actually have the timber effect. These are the various types. It's only a small margin of what they actually currently do or what's on the market. These are templates of what they actually can show you. But if you think of this, you could have the laminate that you want. You could have the tiled floor that you want. You could have that wood effect. You're not restricted as much as you would be previously on these items anymore.
I think what we just want to show is that this is a ceramic. So even it's a wood effect ceramic. So it's not a tile, yeah.
It's the wood effect.
Sorry, I can't get that one in.
If you have got walls outside that you're a bit concerned about, especially brickwork, you need to make sure that your brickwork's actually got all the pointing intact. If the pointing isn't intact, you need to make sure that you actually repoint it or get a builder or someone experienced that knows what they're doing to actually repoint these walls back in. Once they've actually done all the repointing and they're happy with the finish, what you can do is apply a water-based epoxy, which will give you a water sealant against that brickwork. So this will, in theory, penetrate or stop penetrating water running into that brickwork. Any porous material, this will seal it at the front rather than actually letting it through.
And it lets the walls breathe, importantly, as well.
Yes. Other items that we can do is the tanking, various types of tanking materials that you can get now. That obviously, if you are looking to tank because you've got a basement level that you've got continuous water in, these are some of the items that you could actually use. There's putties as well that you can use to seal off all of your external pipework or internal pipework through your gas, electric, and anything like that. We can provide a putty that will actually go off hard and actually seal that off, rather than your normal expanding foam, which could let surface water in or whatever it may be. These actual putties actually create a good sealing out around it. Looking at other methods
We just got to finish up on this one, I think, because we're running out of time.
Okay. Last but not least, then, if you are knowing that you're going to get flooding in, rather than your conventional old sandbags, these are called flood sacks. What they do, you can actually, as it says here, remove the outer packaging, energize your flood sack. Energizing your flood sack is literally just pouring it underwater. If you've already got water coming to the property, you don't need to energize it under normal water, under a kitchen tap, because the water that's coming in will energize it as well. You build your barrier up exactly the same as you would with sandbags. But with these, you don't get that, obviously, the smell. You don't get that bag that you lift up and it rips out your hand, or you've, in theory, all the stuff that is actually going to be flooding with is going to be contaminated. So these are a better option to protect you from anything internally in the home. So they're a good item to have on hand.
Yep, and just quickly, this is a galvanized kitchen unit, which is we're trying to move away from the traditional chipboard. That means that if you do get flooded, you can obviously wipe these units out, and then you can put they can be reused very quickly without having to rip out the kitchen and then have to put it back in again. So these are just another product as well. So anyway, sorry, I think we've overrun, but that concludes our presentation on the PFR.
Fantastic. Thanks, Louisa. Thanks, Mike.
Great, thank you, thanks. And so before I hand back to Janica then, just a slide, I guess, on funding and how much property flood resilience costs. And what I would say before we get into that is, as we've just seen there from the demonstration, lots and lots of products on the market, lots of options available for every property. And so before you embark on deciding what's needed, it's really important that you get the services of an independent flood risk assessor who can conduct a survey for you and advise on the hazard, the risk at your property, the likely depths, checking available models, historical records, things that you might know of yourself, and that can then inform that product choice and that product selection. So I guess the question is then, how much does all of this cost? So typically, the average cost of installing PFR at a property is around about £7,500 to £8,000. But obviously that will depend on lots of factors, the property type, the age of the property, but also the type of flood risk as well. What are the flow paths? Where's the water coming from? How deep is it? And what's the source of flooding as well? And this can be funded in 3 ways. So obviously homeowners can fund it themselves. People who might want to invest in managing their own flood risk. But there are 2 other mechanisms if private funding isn't an option. Very often now, and going back to that idea of that hierarchy that I showed on the earlier slide, very often now the local authority or the Environment Agency are aware of a flood risk in a particular community, and they will run a PFR scheme for that community. So very much like they would for a traditional flood protection scheme. So for a particular community, they will run a PFR scheme where all the measures will be funded as well as the surveys. The final sort of option then is in some local authorities run grant schemes, and actually the government provide grants sometimes after major floods as well. So when we had storms at Kira and Dennis last year, £5,000 was made available via local authorities to pass on to homeowners and towards the cost of PFR. Devon County Council, for example, are running a grant scheme at the moment. So there is often sort of grant funding available as well in certain situations. I think that's probably about it in terms of funding. So Janica, I know you've got a few things just on the website to close on, so back to you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Molly. Yeah, I'll go through this quickly because we obviously want questions, but just to point you again to our website, befloodready.uk. We've mentioned some of the resources we have on there already. So the PFR booklet, I've put the email address in the link. If you want a hard copy, please let us know. Mrs. Tale, which is the Ardman collaborations on there. Phil mentioned the Flood House, which is interactive. We've also got animations of the PFR products. So the things Louisa and Mike have just shown you, we've got cartoons of those on the website. So that should be interesting as well. We also have testimonials. So people who've been in flooding predicaments and had the misery of flooding, telling their stories and how PFR has actually helped them recover from that. And details of all the training and workshops we do are also on there. If we could go to the next slide, Molly, please. That's the one, thank you. The other thing that's on there, which is really useful as we're talking about resilience in communities, is the community hub. It's a safe space where people can join and share stories and get information, you know, share knowledge about flooding, the misery of flooding and PFR. So it's there, and we'd really encourage you to join the community hub because it's a great resource there to support you. So yes, just to wrap up then, I'd just like to hope that we've explained PFR to you and its role in managing flood risks, and also helped you think about how you can promote PFR in your community to critically help strengthen your resilience, you know, and as an individual, household, business, community, understand what it can do in the face of flooding. So yes, that's us done. I'm just going to pass over now and see if there's any questions that are forthcoming.
Molly, if you could unshare the screen, it makes it a lot easier to see if questions come up. Thank you. If anybody has any questions for the Pathfinder team at all, I think we're a small enough group that you can just go ahead and ask your question or just raise your hand. Okay, well, if there are no questions, I'd just like to really reiterate the important message that everything that has been delivered today really should help you to pass on some information to your community. If you have people who are in areas of flood risk, and those links that Janet just put up there, they really should be your go-to resource if you have particular properties at risk of flooding, if you'd like to be able to advise your community further. I will be sending, once I've sort of gathered together all the resources from all of the speakers, an email to all of the attendees and everybody who signed up on our Resilience Forum mailing list. So if you didn't get the chance to jot something down, it will be coming out to you, but it won't be immediate. So just look out in your emails for that as well. So thank you so much to the Pathfinder team. Oh, Janica's just put it in the chat as well, if you want to just quickly copy that. Thank you so much, Pathfinder team. That was a really great collaborative presentation there, and really great to have something practical as well, especially over Zoom, when I think we've felt like we've missed out on that kind of practical type session. So that was great. Thank you. So that's the last session of the day. Thank you so much to everybody who's come along to all of the sessions, any of the sessions. Really enjoyed the day. We will be sending out an evaluation form as well very soon. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend.